Every year on NBA 2K, I always like to do a fantasy draft shortly after the game comes out to explore my NBA a little bit, take a look at some of the players and how they develop, along with obviously going through a fantasy draft, which is always fun. And I did that a few weeks ago. I'll leave a card at the top right of your screen if you'd like to see that. But I wanted to do another one because of the addition of the Curry era. I felt like it would be fun to go back a little bit into the mid-2010s. This is where I really started to get into basketball, along with the same season that I started making content on YouTube. So I feel like the timing of where the Curry era is like a perfect spot. And I feel like it would be really fun to do a fantasy draft with it. So that's what we're going to do. In terms of choosing our rosters, I'm going to make sure it's one with like John Wall and Blake Griffin, Iguodala, all the guys that were not in the regular roster because 2K did not put them in. As for choosing a team, I didn't really know who I wanted to go with, so I figured Minnesota fans are sort of depressed that Karl Anthony Towns has been traded away. I think it's a good trade for both sides, but Towns has been there for almost a decade. He's been one of the faces of the team. Timberwolves fans, I'll give you this today. We're going to use Minnesota. We have a pick in the middle of the first round. I think it's number 16. And look at all the players going to teams who they've already played for. LeBron with the Lakers. Russ with the Nuggets. Kawhi with the Spurs. Harden with the Thunder. It's so ironic. And now here at 16, I don't think there's going to be many good Minnesota choices. I guess maybe Jimmy Butler. But as I was scrolling, I feel like there has to be one obvious pick. And it's Nikola Jokic. He's just as good as everybody else here, but he's 21 years old. He develops very fast in this game. So I figured he'd be a great choice. In the second round, I want to get him a partner long term. And D'Angelo Russell is a guy who I've seen perform well in Curry-era simulations. So I think we've got ourselves a nice little big and guard duo, and we're going to add some more size. Joel Embiid on the board here in the third round. I don't know how him and Jokic are going to fit together, but we're going to make it work. We need some role players, so I'm going to pick Tobias Harris in round 4. We're going to get some defense with Chris Dunn in round 5, and that'll wrap up our starting lineup, at least for season number 1. Now we've got to figure out the bench. I want to get guys who can develop, guys who could be decent trade assets as well. So we'll start with Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. Then we're going to go with Dwight Powell. Common theme here of not drafting too old. I want everybody to be at least somewhat young. Brandon Jennings, he used to be cold back in the day. He's our choice here in round 8. You guys remember Jonathan Simmons with the Spurs? That name is a blast from the past. He'll be our pick here in round number 9. Larry Sanders, who basically retired from the NBA because he wanted to smoke weed. He's the choice in round number 10. And then rounding out the draft, we're looking for upside now. Malachi Richardson in round 11. Wade Baldwin in round 12. Recent draft picks, at least at this time, who hadn't panned out in real life, of course. And then Daniel House and Tariq Black, Rock Chalk, to finish out the draft. So I feel like things went pretty well. I like our big three with Jokic, D'Lo, and Embiid. I don't think Joel Embiid is quite going to develop into the Joel Embiid we know him to be, but D'Lo usually develops into an all-NBA guard, and Jokic is Jokic. He's going to win his MVPs at some point, hopefully here in this video. The goal is to win a title within 3 seasons. I think given development with Jokic and D'Angelo Russell, that can hopefully happen. I don't really know what to expect though season 1, especially with the somewhat awkward fit in the front court of Embiid and Jokic. We're going to play Embiid at the 4 because I want to prioritize Jokic's development since he's better. So at the end of the season, Russell Westbrook wins the MVP with the Denver Nuggets. He won the MVP this season in real life, does it with Denver. Ben Simmons ends up on the Brooklyn Nets. He wins the Rookie of the Year. Zebo, 6th Man of the Year. Draymond wins Depoy. Nikola Jokic, Most Improved. Love to see it. He progresses quicker in the game than he did in real life. He was not this good in 2016-2017 as he makes the All-NBA 3rd team. Our only other All-League representatives were Chris Dunn and Joel Embiid on the 2nd team, and we ended up missing the playoffs. We were actually amongst the worst teams in the league with 28 wins, so not a great season, but we are going to have a pretty high draft pick this year. Likely projected to be in the top 5, but with my lottery luck, I'm expecting it to be pushed back towards the end of the top 10. Here's a look at our team stats. Solid year for D'Lo. Joel Embiid was kind of quiet, only averaged around 11 and 7. Feels weird seeing Embiid only average 11 points per game. He's been a great scorer the second he got onto an NBA floor. Let's simulate the playoffs, see what happens, and ultimately our first champion would be the 76ers, with ironically Jimmy Butler. Again, so many players joining teams that they once played for or are currently with. That brings us into the offseason. I think this is the year that Nike got a hold of all the jerseys, so every team is going to rebrand, Minnesota in particular going with an entirely new look. And that brings us into the draft lottery. We had the 5th projected pick, and we end up with number 1. Okay, I was not expecting that. Hello! We've got the number 1 pick, and I'm definitely open to the idea of trading it away. This is the Tatum, Mitchell, Bam draft class, and I feel comfortable picking one of these guys at number 1. But I also want to win a title sooner than later. Now, I accidentally did not switch the picks back before I started the video, so I guess we have to keep this pick, which is fine. We're going to choose Jason Tatum, and I'm going to figure out if he's a guy who I want to keep over the next 2 years, if he plays well enough, or if we're going to use him as a trade asset. We'll certainly be able to dangle him and get a potentially really good player, but I want to see how it goes with him on our roster. What I like about our team, given that we drafted young, is we're going to have a lot of financial flexibility. Jokic and D'Lo are super cheap. Joel Embiid's not making that much. It's really only Tobias Harris and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. I don't want to sign a max player, though. I do want to see what our core can do. So I'd rather sign a role player. And going through some of these low 80s, I think Otto Porter Jr. would be perfect. Shoots the piss out of the ball, solid perimeter defender, but he gives us spacing, and it never hurts to add a really good perimeter shooter. We're going to sign him to a 3-year deal for $46, and then we're going to bring Brandon Jennings back on a short 1-year deal. The big mover in free agency was Steph Curry. He ends up signing with the Pacers, who, if you remember, they drafted Draymond Green in the first round, who won Depoy. So Steph and Draymond are now back together. As for player progression, I'm hoping for some big jumps. Jokic only goes up by 2. Embiid goes up by 6. That's a big one. D'Lo only up by 2. He's an 82. So those 3 guys are all better. I was hoping for a little bit more out of D'Angelo Russell, but I love seeing a +6 from Embiid. We could use a nice backup guard, and getting off of Michael Kidd-Gilchrist's contract doesn't hurt, so we're going to trade him for Tyler Ulis. That name's a blast from the past. And that'll bring us to season number 2. The team is pretty similar. Obviously, adding Jason Tatum to the starting lineup, Otto Porter Jr. and Tyler Ulis are going to give us some solid minutes off the bench. As James Harden wins the MVP in, of course, Oklahoma City. Lonzo Ball wins the Rookie of the Year. Zebo wins Sixth Man of the Year again, this time with the Sixers. Emmanuel Mudiay, most improved. I thought Emmanuel Mudiay was going to be a dog in the NBA. It's a shame it never happened. Jokic makes All-NBA second team, pretty similar numbers to that of last season. But our team ended up getting a lot better. We're the 5 seed, and we really didn't start the year off that well. We played well down the stretch, and it's encouraging, especially because we were tied for 3rd, technically. As for the East, the Raptors end up with the number 1 seed, but I really like our chances this year, given how well we've played, really since the All-Star break. D'Angelo Russell had a strong season. Embiid was super efficient, even though he didn't put up super big numbers. Overall, I feel like the team's playing really well. I don't know if it's a championship-level team, but I like our squad. We've got the Nuggets in the first round with MVP Russ and literally no one else. Their next best player is Dario Saric, so we end up sweeping them. Thunder in the next round with this year's MVP James Harden. They've got Jabari Parker on the team. He's their second best player. Again, not a great roster, just one really good player, but they end up beating us in 5. And sure enough, they would win the title. That does not look like an NBA Finals team to me. I get that James Harden during 2018-2019 was unstoppable, but their second best player was Jabari Parker. With all due respect, I was a big Jabari Parker fan back in the day, but yeah, I don't know about that. That'll bring us into the offseason. I said my goal was to win a title in year 3. Next year is year 3, so we better get it together. In the draft, I think I'm going to pick Jalen Brunson. He usually does not develop as well in 2K as he did in real life, and he's probably not going to be overly impactful this year as a rookie, but you never know. I figured, why not draft the guy who has turned into one of the best players in the league? So going into the offseason, I think the strategy is to potentially add one more needle mover, per se, a guy who can really make an impact at our shot for the title. Joel Embiid is listed as an unrestricted free agent. That's not right. He would have to be a restricted free agent, and he doesn't want to come back here for whatever reason. I'm going to make sure he comes back, but it was not easy because apparently he doesn't want to sign with anybody. That brings us to the end of the offseason. Pretty much everybody goes back to their original teams. Russ with the Nuggets, LeBron with the Lakers. I am going to give us back Joel Embiid. Again, he should be restricted. I would match whatever offer comes his way. And here in player progression, look at this. Jokic in 93, Embiid in 88, Tatum with a big leap. And I think the plan here, again, I feel like this is the year we have to do it because Russell and Jokic are free agents. Even though those guys would be theoretically easy to bring back, we're going to lose all financial flexibility. So I want this to be the year. I'm going to stick with this core going into the trade deadline, and we're 41-12. The idea was to see how things were going here at the deadline and make a move if I feel like we need one. Now, I definitely wouldn't say we need one. The team is playing really well. We have the best record in the Western Conference by around 10 games. But I think we can upgrade off of Jason Tatum. He's an 86 overall, and I'm sure we can get a higher rated player for him. Amongst the offers here, we can get Kyrie Irving from the Miami Heat. We can get Draymond from Indiana, Blake Griffin, LaMarcus Aldridge. Porzingis is an 89. After going through everybody's numbers here, I think Kyrie Irving is probably going to be the move. Gets us a really good, true scorer. He's having a ridiculous year in Miami, 27.5 points per game on 64% true shooting percentage. He has an estimated wins added of 16 compared to Jason Tatum, who has 2. So I feel like this is kind of a no-brainer, and we're upgrading off the bench from Tyler Ulis to Will Barton. So Kyrie's going to play the 1. Russell will slide over to the 2. And now we've got a big four-headed monster as Jokic wins the MVP. His number is pretty similar. His efficiencies from 3 goes way up. And obviously the team is a lot better. I would imagine that's the biggest reason why he won it. Thibodeau wins Coach of the Year. We go 61-21. No All-NBA players. I was hoping to get Kyrie there after the great first half of the year he had with Miami. But we do end up as the number 1 seed. And this does feel like the team to beat. 11-point lead on second place in the West. 9-point lead on the first seed in the East, being Boston. Kyrie's numbers did go down, though, after the trade deadline. Understandably so. He now has to play with Jokic, Embiid, and D'Angelo Russell, but he was still unbelievably efficient with us, so I can't really complain. Embiid got quite a bit better, and he did it on 57% shooting. Very impressive, and obviously Jokic won the MVP. We've got Memphis in the first round. This is a good team. Wall, Booker, Melo. How are they an 8 seed? They end up winning the first game and would give us a competitive series. We win in 6. I don't know how that team's an 8 seed, though. That squad was nice. We've got Utah in the second round with Giannis, young Donovan Mitchell. Not a bad team either. Better than the teams we saw last year, in my opinion, and they're up 2-0. Not a good start, but we would take the next 3. They win Game 6, so that'll bring us into Game 7, and we would blow the doors off of them in the first quarter. The Jazz would keep it competitive, but our early lead was enough to win. D'Lo played well while injured, and speaking of injuries, Tobias Harris recently suffered a concussion, out for the rest of the playoffs. That's a big deal. There's a chance he'd be the guy who would have guarded Kawhi Leonard. Now that's not the case, but it might not matter. We're taking care of business against the Spurs. We win in 6, and we'll be playing Boston in the finals. Their best player is DeMarcus Cousins, who's had a great year. Jamal Murray's playing really well. But I feel like this is the worst team we've played against. How are these guys the number 1 seed, yet that Grizzlies team is an 8 seed? Booker's not listed here. I guess he got hurt. But what am I missing? We're way better than Boston. We should be able to beat them, but it's a really competitive series, and now we're down 3-1. We lost 2 of those games by 1 as well, which hurts. Can we complete the comeback? Game 5 at home. We win by 20. Big game for Jokic. Embiid played well. Kyrie with 20. That'll bring us into Game 6 now. On the road at the TD Garden. And it looks like we're going to win this one as well. 122-108. Kyrie with 30. And now we're hoping Boston can blow a 3-1 lead. Wouldn't be the first time for Kyrie here in Game 7. Very competitive game, but we would dominate in the fourth quarter, outscoring them 41-19. It looks like we had this game won. I'm going to call a timeout, bring the starters in. I don't really want Will Barton to be the guy who dribbles out the clock, considering he was basically a throw-in in a mid-season deal this year. He's only been with our team for about 3 minutes. So we're going to bring the starters back in. It's only right that Jokic is the guy who dribbles out the clock. He was our number 1 pick. He's the MVP. He has a 30-point triple-double in this game, by the way. But we get called for the 8-second backcourt violation. Well, that's unfortunate. I guess we're not going to get to dribble out the clock. And Boston will instead with just a couple seconds to go. But nonetheless, an exciting season. #1 seed. Not an easy playoff run. We saw some good teams in the West. The Grizzlies with Wall, Booker, Valanciunas, and Carmelo Anthony. The Jazz in the second round with Giannis and Donovan Mitchell. The Spurs in the conference finals with Kawhi and them. And then Boston, on paper, I feel like is the worst team we've seen, but they still brought us to 7. They led this series 3-1. But we ultimately come back, winning the final 3 games to get it done. And this team does win an NBA championship within 3 seasons, which was our initial goal going into the video. And I like that we were able to do it with the core that we drafted. We kept Nikola Jokic, D'Angelo Russell, and Joel Embiid. We saw the 3 of them improve. We held on to Tobias Harris. We held on to Chris Dunn. And really the only super big move we made was obviously getting Kyrie Irving, along with adding some solid role players like Otto Porter Jr. But this team was really predicated on the fantasy draft and the guys we picked in the middle of the first round. That's not an easy spot to be in because we're not going to draft a 90 overall player. We have to wait a while for our second pick, and we were able to still make the most of it. Of course, as we know, it was our top fantasy draft pick, Nikola Jokic, who led the way with a 30-piece, along with 11 boards and 13 assists. He had himself a day. 20 for D'Lo, 18 for Embiid. Kyrie Irving did not have a great performance, but it doesn't matter. We get the job done. And Nikola Jokic wins the Finals MVP a few years earlier than he did in real life. This is 2019, the year that Kawhi won it with the Raptors. This is what our final stats look like for the postseason, and we won those last few games without Tobias Harris and without Chris Dunn, who were 2 of our more important role players. So that's going to wrap up the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you have any other 2K experiments, if you will, feel free to share them down in the comments, and I would be happy to consider them for a future video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.